Canadian Tactical Officers Association Copcast, and you're talking about everything COVID today. Myself, I don't really have a horse in this race. I'm just curious, and by demand, people have been asking me to do a program on COVID, and so here we are. We're reaching out to people today. Right now, we've got Matt Sheehy, a friend of mine, a member of the Canadian Tactical Officers Association. He follows politics and what's in the news, and we're just going to ask Matt for his opinion of this situation. So, Matt, how are you?
Good. How are you, Jim? I haven't seen you for a while.
It's been a while. I guess with COVID, this is the only way we can talk to one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. At least we're not so concerned like some folks that take a mask on and off while they're on a Zoom call. I've seen that go on. So
really, I've yet to see that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So, yeah, all right. Well, I guess I'm agreed to answer questions that you may have.
Well, I'll start out with the last 3 days.
Yeah.
We've had the truckers, I guess it's the Freedom Protester.
Well, it's called the Freedom Convoy. Yeah.
And what can you tell me about that?
Well, I'm sort of happy you called, and I'll tell you what I did do one day. The day they first were on their way to Toronto or Ottawa, I went out to one of the overpasses, close to where I live, and it was a terribly cold day. Wind was howling, and it was about, I don't know, at least 0 degrees. Nevertheless, I was really moved by the people that were there. They were there with carriages. They were there with children. There were old folks. There were young folks. And in my background, I had spent a little bit of time, 7 years actually, with auxiliary OPP here in this Wellington County area.
Right.
And I was very familiar with this particular site because myself and my partner had quite an interesting arrest there at one time. That being said, so I parked in this, it's a commuter parking lot, and it was full. And there wasn't one car there that was brand new. They were all older, older, not as old as mine, but certainly all, kind of the run-of-the-mill Fords, Chevys, and rust buckets that you could find. And these people, to me, they're the heart and soul of what it means to be Canadian. And they stood out there in that cold weather with signs, with flags. I actually had to use my police training to try and get them across this. It was very busy, and there's no way to get them across. So you put up your hand, and people are courteous. The thing is, there are a lot of distractions, and there was kids, and I was really scared actually that someone would get hurt, but no, they were okay. But talk about lighting a fire, creating a point of contact for your average Canadian. It was a phenomenon. Now, I'll tell you something else. It goes back a little bit, and again to my days as an auxiliary. Myself and another gentleman at that point, we were sent down to block some traffic when they were bringing back our soldiers from Afghanistan. And the bridge was full at that point as well, with flags, with, fire trucks, people, basically honoring, these brave men and women that unfortunately were been killed over there. So it came to my mind when I was at the bridge just the other day. A kind of a thought came to my mind, a parallel between what I had seen back in 2006 in a police cruiser, and what I witnessed a few days ago. And that same bridge, same highway, same people, slightly different circumstances, but all for the same reason.
And what
Freedom.
would that reason be?
Freedom. Freedom. Some fought and died for it, and these people were here to support these truckers that are coming in that believe in freedom, and I believe in freedom.
So that indicates to me that they perhaps feel that freedoms are being taken away.
Absolutely, they're being taken away. I mean, and it's unfortunate because this COVID-19 has created a situation where people are not allowed to voice an opinion that's contrary to the whatever the CBC happens to say. Okay, and the mainstream media.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that. I posted something just a day ago in regard to the funeral for the two officers we lost in New York State.
Right.
And actually, I reshared this particular article. And I didn't really take time to look at the source. I just thought I saw, police officers, brothers and sisters in unity supporting the families of the fallen officers. And
Exactly.
a friend of mine from New Jersey sent me an email almost immediately commenting on the source of the picture, but I didn't even take time to look at what news agency it came from. I just thought, well, this is a wonderful gesture, and I reshared it. But clearly, people no longer have any trust in the media. It's like, so where do we get information from?
Well, I mean, you're right. The media have an agenda, and there's certain amount of financial gain that's been provided, and they know where it's coming from, and so they follow that narrative. There was a time when journalists would go out there and just report the facts, and let the readers and the public decide for themselves, what the moral or ethics of the story were all about. But that's why what you're doing here with the Canadian Tactical Officers Association on these blogs, talking to a regular guy like me, if you will, and is that there's an alternative media now that's really growing rapidly, because people don't follow the media anymore. The newspapers, they don't read them anymore, because you might as well, if you could read one, and I don't want to get into a lawsuit or something like that, but newspaper A and newspaper B and newspaper C, it's all the same story. No one seems to have a difference of opinion. And I mean, our democracies demand that there's an aggressive, not aggressive, but a fulsome exchange of ideas. And
Yes.
Voltaire, for example, Voltaire said, "Look, I may not agree with you, but I'll defend your right to say it." And I was brought up, in a good old Irish Catholic family, if you will, and my dad was a fireman, and they were very well-read people. I mean, books, and they didn't follow. We didn't have a TV until I was about 10 years old.
Sure.
So we read, and we listened, and we debated, we talked, and I learned about values, about truthfulness, about being honest, from my parents, and I think we've lost that today with our children, especially this new generation. I take my grandson to school, and he's just turned 6, and it breaks my heart. He's wearing this mask, and these kids are walking around with masks on. And,
Well, I find for me, it's this whole process is mentally exhausting.
of course, it is. Yeah.
It's you wake up with COVID news, you go to bed with COVID news, you're
Yeah.
out and about, you drive down the highway, there's signs,
Yeah.
wear your mask, get your vaccine,
Yeah.
And personally, I've done all of those things, and I do those things, but I feel terrible that it seems to be dividing people, and
It is.
that's more my concern than
Yeah.
the virus itself.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm with a group called the Police on Guard for Thee, right?
Yes.
It's an excellent group of people, and some of my associates are in Ottawa as we speak, so they're down there. But their position is, well, for example, what we consider the father of policing was a gentleman by the name of Robert Peel, Sir Robert Peel, right? And his position was, and because the police have an authority that's invested in them, and they have an oath to protect the public, they're under a lot of pressure these days, because Robert Peel said the police are the people and the people are the police, and you've got to have that community has to have confidence that the police officer that comes to the door, whether he's black, yellow, or green, doesn't matter. He's there to assess the situation in an honest and objective way. And the media have an enormous effect on the way people think, right? And I would think the police officers now are caught really in the middle between the politicians and the people. And that so far, I would say people still have confidence in our men and women in uniform, and they should, because the majority are really good people, and most of them have joined the police department to help.
Well, they want to do good things, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of what drives everybody to law enforcement is they want to do things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
and I know
help. Yeah.
The Stand on Guard came out quite early, in regard to what they see as perhaps a mission creep in law enforcement in terms of trying to enforce COVID rules. Exactly.
I mean, we don't want to get too deep into some of these legalities, if you will, but a mandate is not law, okay? And they use the word mandate. I mean, if you want to get put another spin on it, you could call it dictate, okay? If you want to put another spin on it, who's the dictator and why? And so the police officers now have been put in a situation where they're said, you've got to enforce these mandates. But they have to ask the question, well, are these mandates legal? And,
well, I have to say that, I don't know if you recall this, it's probably at least a year ago, the Premier of Ontario came out and basically, if I recall the story accurately, but there was inferred that police officers should be able to stop people in the street and ask for their identification. But what I found encouraging about that was the chiefs of police in Ontario unanimously came out and said, well, we can't do that, with all due respect.
Right.
And so I thought that was you would think that a government would know better than to ask the police to do something like that. And it was encouraging to see the chiefs of police, walk back from that.
I totally agree, and I'm sure the majority of law enforcement men and women in uniform right now would agree with you. Okay, because there's a lot more important things to do than to ask somebody to move away from front of some politician's office because you're carrying a flag too close or something like that.
Well,
you have an opinion.
Reaching back in my memory, but I recall, people not being allowed to skate on the pond, and kids were playing road hockey, and they weren't allowed to, and it just kind of steamrolled out of control.
Exactly, and I have friends that are in the medical profession as well.
Sure.
And what's happening to our young people these days? This has been 2 years. It was supposed to be 2 weeks, right? Yeah, it's been over 2 years, and it's government overreach. Okay, they have a role to play, but we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms as well. But let's go back to the kids for a minute. The kids, from what I'm getting, feedback from doctors and nurses and teachers, a lot of children now are suffering mental problems, right? And they're being, to the point, they're told they can eat, but they're not allowed to talk, right? I'm so happy to see you because I haven't seen you for a long time. We're sort of catching up. It's human beings are they're social animals.
100%.
We need to communicate, and so by stopping that communication and by putting a mask on somebody, by the way, as you being a cop yourself, years ago when someone would walk around with a mask, you might decide to you might want to talk to that person, right? What do you do?
Well, I think it's an offense.
Yeah, I think it is. You're hiding but children need to see people's full facial expression to understand what.
100%.
So they're not learning the way they should. They're not communicating with each other. And don't forget, teenagers suffer the most because teenagers had a very formative time in their lives, and they don't really.
In their lives, 100%.
Yeah, they've got to share with each other. And you were a teenager at one time. I know it was a long time ago. Me too. But sure, we used to talk to each other, and you kind of laugh at it. But we didn't bring some subjects up with our parents. You talk to like Tony, the tough guy here. Hey, Tony, what do you think of this? And Tony said, "Well, I'm not sure what happened to Tony. I think he might be a politician these days." But that being said, so we talked to another guy, and the guy said, "Oh no, Tony's full of baloney. He doesn't know what he's talking about." So eventually, you kind of come to your own conclusion, and that, in a way, that was the primary way of teaching critical thinking, because you have to challenge and ask, and then you make up your own mind. That's the way you make decisions. I was a pilot. I spent 37 years flying airplanes.
That's all communication.
And it's it's communication, but it's absolutely, and it's just you and the other guy. Sometimes three, but
sure.
You have to be able to make critical decisions in short order, not unlike a police officer, all right? And then, if you run off the runway, people go, "Whoa, how did that happen?" Well, sir, it was slippery, and I made a mistake. I landed too long, I landed too fast, and ran out of runway. And a police officer has to make a decision in split seconds as well. So that taught me and my my confreres that are in aviation and policing. We have a capacity to make decisions in a hurry, and most of the time they're correct. But once in a while, a mistake is made. But that breaks my heart when you see 4,000 lawyers and 10 million engineers all descend on this one guy because he ran off the runway, right? It's not really fair because you weren't there, and no one's perfect, and people make mistakes. And if you make a complete mistake that's based on, I don't know, stupid, or you shouldn't be in the job, that's one thing. But when you're faced with, let's say, someone pointing a gun at you, you can't say, well, excuse me, sir, is that loaded or is it a fake? You don't have time. You really don't. So you make a decision. And then it turns out, the gun was
Well, based on your training, right?
Yeah. Experience, yeah. I mean, but it all happens within seconds.
It does.
Whereas, in the inquiries, a good example was Sully that landed the Airbus in the
Yes.
East River.
Quite a job.
Amazing. So they ran into, of course, Canadian geese, and they, both engine quit, and they're coming out of LaGuardia, which I've flown in and out of a lot. So they were coming north, and boom, boom, they hit a flock of Canadian geese. Both engines quit. They were at about, I don't know, maybe 1,800 feet, barely, out of there. So the airplane doesn't fall out of the sky, but it's not going up anymore.
Right.
So he made an immediate turn. And then they started, ATC said, can you make it back to LaGuardia? And, his experience and all that, no way. You can't make it back. So, and I'll bring that up later because it's really quite an interesting story. So then he just carried on, and they just barely got over the bridge. It's the Washington. I'll call it the Washington Bridge. That's not what it is, but they just cleared that bridge by maybe 20 feet because they're losing altitude all the time.
Sure.
Now, where's he going to go? They keep asking, would you want to go here? He says, not, I'm going into the river. That's all. That's the only place I can put this thing down. Anyway, he landed amazingly in the river, and he was lucky. There was daytime, and there was lots of people around in boats and rescue.
Yeah, I got to say, that's the fascinating thing about New York City is they just continue like it's a regular day.
Yeah, well, they're it's
in the river. They do their rescue, but the rest of the city keeps moving. They seem to be able to handle tragedies fairly well.
Yeah, but anyway, they finish the story and compliment Sully. He did a tremendous job. Saved all those people. But they decided, well, we're going to have to make an inquiry here. Fair enough. It's part of the deal. And what they did was they put this whole scenario into a simulator exercise, and they got, I forget, 20 of the best pilots they could find, crew, and they told them what was going to happen. And of course, they already knew. They knew the story, and they said, "Well, we want you to try and get back to LaGuardia." Okay. So as soon as things happened, these guys knew exactly. I'm going to head back. I'm heading back right now. Crank it into a 180-degree turn, and away I go. But as you well know, from policing or aviation, when those birds hit that airplane, you don't immediately say, well, I'm going back to LaGuardia, let's turn left. You kind of have a second or two to go, like, what happened?
Sure.
Okay. What's going on? Well, I don't know. It doesn't sound good. Smells like goose, and I don't think it's Thanksgiving anymore, right?
Right.
So there was no hesitation. Let's say there was 20 of them. One guy actually barely made it. He did. He made it. 1 out of 20. That's not an accurate assessment of the reality that Sully was dealing with.
Well, clearly, I think Sully.
They exonerated him. They never know when.
But obviously, he looked at the situation based on his experience and training, weighed the odds, and the best option was to land in the river.
Yep.
I'm sure if he believed in his experience and training, that he could get back to LaGuardia, he would have done it.
Exactly. It was a judgment call. And he
I
was
think
right.
it was a
He
good
was right.
judgment.
Yeah, he wouldn't have made it because he hesitated for, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds.
Sure.
And that meant that he would not have landed at the airport. He would have landed somewhere in the vicinity of the airport.
Sure. Yeah.
So, hey,
Friend, it's we're going to wrap it up. I appreciate
Okay.
your seeing you again and your comments
you too.
today.
You too, Jim. Always good to see you. Always good to see you.
And,
And keep up the good work. I think these kind of programs are excellent and very helpful.
Well, perhaps we can get you on in the future on another subject.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. All right. Have a good
All right,
day,
Jim.
buddy.
Yeah.
Kneel down in the underground where the science fiction starts. Gonna have it all my way, so